Now, you talk very positive terms. I mean, that's your job as International Trade Secretary, of course. But you, as I mentioned earlier, you do inspire quite a lot of anger on the opposite benches. I say, very much a Marmite character. There's a lot of talk about abuse in politics at the moment. A number of female MPs have said that they're actually going to stand down, not stand the next election, because of the abuse that they've had. Do you get much personal abuse? Do you get it on Twitter? Do you get letters? Do you get emails to your surgery or to the ministry? And what effect does it have on you, if any?
So on Twitter, I only read the comments of people I follow, because I believe that I wouldn't go into a pub and just have somebody having a go at me and just sit there and take it. Of course I wouldn't. I'm only going to listen on Twitter to the people who are capable of having a reasonable conversation. And I think we've got to be very careful, because I'm a believer in free speech and I'm a believer in robust political debate. And I mentioned one of the reasons I got excited about politics when I was growing up is there was robust political debate. And there is a bit of an idea that we're suddenly in this era where there's lots of political mudslinging. Political mudslinging's been going on forever. You know, Nye Bevan said that Conservatives were lower than vermin. You know, in the 1980s, some of the vitriol slung at Mrs. Thatcher was pretty extreme. And
you don't think anything's really changed?
I don't really think it has. I think social media has obviously spread it more, but I think those fundamental antagonisms, the battle of ideas, has been something that has gone on for years. And I think, whilst I obviously don't support abuse or people, you know, incitement to violence and those terrible things, we've got to be careful not to be too censorious of people having a genuine political debate. And I think one of the frustrations of the British public is that there's a certain amount of censoring of what it's acceptable to say. Yeah. And that is a big problem, because if you sweep people's views under the carpet,
people talking about concerns about immigration for years, just been written off as racist.
It was an unacceptable subject. Yeah. And what happened, it was not properly discussed in Parliament.
But isn't the key issue here, it's only censorious on one side? So we had that ridiculous conversation across the nation about whether or not it was awful for Boris Johnson to talk about a surrender under the Benn Act, and how this was terrible, terrible language, and as a leaver, and how awful this was, and how this engendered this terrible political climate. After 3.5 years of leavers being called racist, xenophobes, ignorant, uneducated, fascists, every word under the sun. The censoriousness only happens in one direction, I find.
There is this belief on the left that they have the moral high ground, that somehow
the nasty party.
all of their sort of views are done through the best of intentions, so they can kind of get away with saying stuff that those on the right get slagged off or extricated for over the words they use and the language they use. And one of the things I think we do have to do as Conservatives is be more self-confident about our beliefs. Because I'm a Conservative because I believe it is best. You know, giving people freedom of their own lives, people taking responsibility is best for them and it's best for our country. And that's how people in Britain want to live. I think people don't like being told what to do. I think that's a large motivation behind the Brexit vote. I think it's a large motivation behind why people are frustrated with politics at the moment, and they don't like, you know, the nanny state, and they don't really like being told what to do. So I think that that sometimes some Conservatives have been a bit too keen to apologise for those beliefs and say, oh, well, maybe we're a bit wrong, maybe we should cross-dress a bit with some Labour policies. And I think we're going to win this election by being confident about our beliefs.
And in coming back to the abuse, do you think some of the MPs who complain about the abuse they get, I mean, no, never acceptable people to threaten rape or killing or anything like that, but some of the digs that people have for perhaps betraying, for instance, their promises at the last general election about delivering Brexit, this is basic politics here. Do you think they're being a bit snowflakey?
I certainly think there are some times when a legitimate argument is made, and rather than people argue against the argument, they instead say it's unfair that the point's even been put. And I think that is a threat to free speech. And I think we need to be very careful about that as a country. We need to be open about the disagreements we have. Of course, they should be respectful. We shouldn't have, you know, threats of violence and so on. But I think that
But there does seem to be a lot more focus when there is someone on the left or on the Remain side who is barracked. We saw that awful scenes of Anna Soubry being followed back into Parliament some months ago and being barracked by people. But again, no physical threat to her whatsoever. And yet there have been some really very aggressive behaviour towards Conservatives or other leaders, and say Nigel Farage, for instance, and that almost gets laughed off by the same people who don't like someone shouting at someone.
I think it is what is sauce for the goose should be sauce for the gander. Okay. I think it should be, I think we should have a robust level of political debate in this country. And this country has a huge tradition of free speech. It's one of the things that's made us successful, and we lose that at our peril.
One of, I think, the really big surprises for me in terms of Boris Johnson's cabinet appointments was not that you were International Trade Secretary, but that you were given the Equalities brief as Minister for Women and Equalities. As someone who, like me, doesn't really sign up to the idea of women as perpetual victims, which seems to be what modern feminism is about.
We are 52% of the population, so I see us as the majority, not the minority.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of idea that women are always put upon, gender pay gap, all of these different issues. Was that a brief that you wanted to take on? Because I don't see it as a very easy fit, given the sort of role that being the Equalities and Women's Equalities Minister is.
I see it as an opportunity to do things differently, because I think there's been too much identity politics in Britain. There's been too much of, you think this thing because you're a woman or you're part of this group and, we want you to do X, Y, or Z. I would much rather see individuals being allowed to succeed regardless of their gender, their sexuality, their race. And that's the way I'm approaching this brief. So we've got to get away from this idea that somebody should be appointed to a job, because no one wants to be the token woman. You don't want to feel like you've been appointed to a job because you've got boobs. Likewise, no one wants to be the token gay person. And I think that we need to think differently about this. I think there's been too much ground ceded to the left on identity politics, and we need to reassert the value of individual talent and character above the particular type of group you might happen to be a member of.
There's a very big difference, isn't there? People not missing out because of their skin colour, their race, their sexuality or whatever it is, and someone, as you say, getting the job for it. Do you think that, I suppose that the Ministry for Equalities, Women and Equalities, is the right name for that ministry then?
Well, I think we could, that's what it's called at the moment. But what I see it as is it should be the department freeing people to do what they want to do with their lives. So it should be the Ministry for Freedom. Exactly, being able to make those own choices, not being restricted because they're a woman or because they're gay or because they're from a particular ethnic minority. So what I'm going to be focusing on is removing those barriers to success. So what is it holding people back? Where are the stereotypes that are preventing people having opportunities, rather than trying to classify people in groups?
Okay, and one of the other issues that has come under that brief, of course, is the Gender Recognition Act. Again, a lot of this has sort of passed by under the radar. I've certainly talked about it a lot on my talk radio show, and this is about trans rights, the right to basically say, if you're born biologically a man, to say without any medical intervention, any surgery or anything, to simply say, certify that you are a woman, you are a trans woman, and to have that recognised in law without anything happening as a result of that. The reality, of course, this means that women-only spaces, refuges, prisons for women, and changing rooms and like could see biological men in those places legally allowed to be there. Now, people might feel very pro-trans rights, but they also might, like me, have a teenage daughter and think, I'd really rather not have a man in the changing rooms at Topshop. Thank you very much. What is the status of the Gender Recognition Act right now?
So we are currently looking at the results of the consultation from the Gender Recognition Act. One thing I'm very keen to do is make sure we protect single-sex spaces. That is really, really important. And at the same time, of course, if grown adults want to make a decision to transition, that is perfectly, that is a perfectly good decision, and we should support those decisions and prevent bullying and harassment of trans people. But it is also important that we make sure that we protect single-sex spaces. And also, when children are growing up, before they're fully capable of making decisions, we should be very careful about how we guide those children, the opportunities that they're given. So I'm a great believer that once somebody is an adult, they should have full freedom to live their life as they want to live it. And they shouldn't be harassed, they shouldn't be victimised. Everybody should have those opportunities and those choices. But I think it's a different issue when somebody is growing up. So those are the things that I'm looking very carefully at, because we don't want to make any precipitate decisions on this.
We have seen a massive growth in children supposedly transitioning, and of course this often renders them infertile, and again decisions being made from a very, very young age, even as young as 3. You're not happy about that going ahead?
Well, I am very concerned about children when they're developing making irreversible decisions. I think there's a great difference between somebody who is an adult being able to make decisions about their future. I'm a great believer in the best people to make decisions about you is you, but you have to be fully developed in terms of your decision-making capability. And that's why we protect children in all kinds of ways, because they're not yet fully able to make those types of decisions.
And just finally, we've got a Speaker's election after John Bercow steps down. One of the candidates, Harriet Harman, former Labour Deputy Leader, her shtick for the election has been, vote for me, I'm a woman, there hasn't been a woman other than, since Betty Boothroyd, and it's time for me to be elected as Speaker because I'm a woman. Can you imagine ever seeking a job, whether it's as party leader, as Prime Minister or any other job, because you're a woman?
Never. I just think it's a bad argument to use. Of course, women should have every opportunity to go for those jobs, but it's surely because of somebody's character, somebody's abilities that we should select them for a job, not whether they're a man or a woman. And I always think, look at it the other way. If Harriet Harman was a man, would she really be saying, well, we need a male speaker? Would it ever be acceptable to say that? No, it wouldn't. Can you imagine any job somebody saying, you've got to vote for me because I'm a man? No. And we shouldn't accept one set of rules for women and one set of rules for men, because that is arguing against equality. So, for example, there are some people, I remember the leader of the Green Party claiming that we should have an all-female cabinet on the grounds it would be more caring and compassionate. I don't believe that for an instance. It's sexist to say that women are more caring and compassionate, in the same way it's sexist to say that men are naturally stronger or better leaders. So I think it's a hypocritical argument to say there are qualities that women have that men don't have, and vice versa.
Do you think you'd make a good leader of the party? Of the Conservative Party, a good Prime Minister?
Well, we've got a fantastic Prime Minister at the moment, and I'm going to be working very hard over the next few weeks to get him the majority that he deserves. But am I an aspirational person? Yes, I am. Do I want to continue in the working in the government? Of course I do. But I will work in any way, shape, or form that is going to deliver on our ambitions for Britain.
Okay, International Trade Secretary Liz Truss, thank you very much
Thank
indeed for talking to me here on the Julia Hartley Brewer Show. So if you've enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to share it on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere else, using the hashtag JHB Show. Don't forget to like, to comment, to review, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss the next show. It's also the best way of making sure other people do get to hear about the conversation. Until next time, thank you very much indeed.